Hello, cruel, cruel world. My name is Dr. Sohom. I'm a consultant forensic psychiatrist. I assess mentally disordered offenders for a living so that you don't have to. You can call me the ominous Sohominous. Okay, so I've already made part one of this two-part series, which was 5 hidden signs that you might have autism. I'm not talking about the barn door textbook stuff. I'm talking about the kind of the secretive, clandestine, not so obvious things. I also outlined the specific symptoms of the diagnosis of autism, not just the challenges, but also the strengths that some autistic people might have. And I also gave you some stats. This episode is part 2. So I'm going to specifically talk about how people with autism might struggle in romantic relationships. And I'm not just going to give you some vague general nonsense. I'm going to break down some actual specific examples and scenarios. Let's see if any of this rings familiar to you. So the dating game is hard enough as it is. Not for me, obviously. My wife worships the ground that I walk on, just in a very kind of passive-aggressive way where she's constantly disappointed. I mean, people, obviously, they have different languages of loves, don't they? And instead of kisses and hugs, my wife very lovingly rolls her eyes and she sighs a lot. Anyway, I digress. This video is part 2. So how people struggle in romantic relationships, not just in a general sense of the relationship, but also going on specific dates. Okay, enough foreplay, Jorge. Let's get into the episode. Cue the music. Okay, so the first way that subtle autism might impact your dating game or your relationship is social communication and difficulties. So autism can affect social skills, making it difficult to understand and interpret social cues, especially if those cues are subtle, such as sarcasm or humor or implied meaning. So when people engage in specific conversations, they might struggle to do that, or they might not be able to express emotions effectively. And this can lead to misunderstandings, it can lead to hurt feelings and difficulties in building and then maintaining romantic relationships. Okay, I know what you're thinking, put your money where your nose is, let's get specific. So Eve has undiagnosed autism and she's been dating Calvin for a few months, and she's invited him to a family picnic, and it's a big deal because it's going to be the first time that he's met her family. And Eve's cousin is a bit of a douchebag. I mean, the dude is wearing white socks with sandals and he's got like a backwards cap on, and he makes lots of digs and sarcastic comments at Calvin, who has recently lost his job. Now, because these were subtle and they were sarcastic and they were not exactly what he was saying, but it's more the tone that he was saying it, Eve didn't notice any of this. So Calvin therefore gets annoyed that Eve didn't stand up for him. Now, we'll come to check back in on Calvin and Eve later on in this episode. The saga continues. Number 2 way that subtle autism might affect dating or relationships is sensory sensitivities. So autistic people might have a heightened or sometimes diminished senses. And let's just say that can affect what's going on in between the sheets, saucy. So it can make physical intimacy uncomfortable or overwhelming. And it's not just because of your partner's body odor, because let's face it, to be fair to him, he did spray himself with Lynx Africa before your special time. Or it's not because of that weird birthmark he has on his back that looks like James Blunt. Undiagnosed autistic adults might need more time to become physically comfortable with intimacy because it can be quite overwhelming. So they might need more of an effort, let's say, to set the mood. So maybe it's time to brush off those scented candles and the Best of Boys to Men playlist. Another example where sensory overload might thwart romance is that autism can make certain social situations uncomfortable or overwhelming. So let's get specific. Mac and Erica have been dating for quite a while, and Erica has had a string of bad boyfriends. Brad from reception was a lying twit, but she thinks that Mac might be the one. So Mac goes to meet Erica's best friends from university for a very first time at brunch in Wetherspoons. And they meet in a busy bar, and Erica is really disappointed because Mac is just being so bland. He's being so quiet. He's being so beige when he's usually quite articulate and he's quite intelligent, but he's barely saying anything. So what Erica doesn't know is that Mac has low-level autism, and he's just finding the whole situation as sensory overload. So he's already nervous at the pressure of making a good first impression, but then the music is far too loud and it's far too harsh, and they're sitting next to a gambling machine, which is very distracting with its bright lights. And what makes things worse is that Erica's best friend has a laugh like a hyena being disemboweled. It's very grating. So Mac, poor fella, it's all very disorientating and distracting for him. And he can barely absorb what these bumbling cackle of women are actually saying. So he slowly gets kind of edged out of the conversation and ignored. And Erica thinks that he's being intentionally standoffish and that he's not making an effort to meet her friends. So she's very disappointed, unfairly. Number 3 way that autism can damage a relationship potentially is rigid routines and thinking. So autistic people have a very strong need for predictability within their routines, and that means that it can be difficult for them to adapt. They can't be very flexible, and this might damage the spontaneity that's required in romantic relationships, especially at the beginning. And this lack of flexibility might be unintentionally interpreted as a voluntary refusal for compromise, and that can even lead to a power dynamics. Think about it: if you're in a romantic relationship and one partner's routines or interests seem to be more important or dominant than the other. Okay, girls, I'm going to let you into a little secret now. You know that play that you went to with your new boyfriend on your second date? You know the one, the rom-com about Kim, the sarcastic, powerful, independent city trader whose heart had been broken as a teenager, and she somehow falls in love with a janitor who volunteers for Scope, and they come from different worlds. And, you know, it's amazing. The whole time you're watching, you're wondering, you know, will it work? Will they ever get into a relationship? Your boyfriend's pretending to be interested, but the whole time he was wondering about getting into something else. And boys, remember how at the beginning of your relationship, she went paintballing with you for 5 times? Sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but she actually hated it. She might have been laughing with your friends in the pub as they were mocking Gordo for not being able to run away because of his gout, but in reality she was fantasizing about stabbing each one of your friends in the eye with a pen. So that begs the question, why did each of you go through this torture? It's because at the beginning of a relationship, you both wanted to make a good first impression. You wanted to give the vibe of being, you know, spontaneous and flexible and wild and passionate, and also maybe you wanted to brighten up your horizons and experiences. But somebody with subtle autism might struggle. They might not actually be able to feign interest in the first place because of their rigid routines and interest. So this might be misinterpreted as being selfish, and this can lead to feelings of resentment or feelings of isolation. Another example is that somebody with subtle diagnosed autism, they might refuse to go out for dinner because it doesn't fit into their carefully planned schedule. Even though to you, it might seem pretty obvious that all they have to do is book the spin class 1 hour earlier, but you might not appreciate the degree of just distress and discomfort that it causes them to change their plans. So connected to this, but not a different symptom, but similar behavior, could be the autistic kind of reluctance for socializing and the preference for isolation. So overly rigid adherence to routines or interests can lead to socialization, and the individual might struggle to find activities or relationships that fit into their structured lifestyle. So they might feel uncomfortable with change, is what I'm saying. Number 4 method or way that having subtle autism can impact your love life is difficulty expressing emotions. Before I get into that, I want to introduce you to this channel. This is the Schmike for Small Minds. I'm a consultant forensic psychiatrist, so I assess mentally disordered offenders. I give evidence as an expert witness. These videos are sometimes about mental illness, sometimes about violence and criminality, sometimes about the crossover betwixt the two. There's something for everybody on this channel. If you've got time for a quick shrink, go check out my other videos. I've got some recently that are like 5 signs that you've got a bad therapist, 5 myths about men's mental health, 5 myths about modern day slavery. Go chiggity, check it out. Now, I implore you to subscribe. I implore you, because not only does it help me out immeasurably, but if you subscribe, you will never get sunburn again. The kids will stop laughing at you on the beach because you look like a lobster. Guaranteed, or your money back. Okay, so the 4th way that autism might damage your relationship is difficulty expressing emotions. So autistic individuals might struggle to express or even understand their own emotions, let alone other people's. So this can lead to difficulties in forming a deep emotional connection. Okay, let's go to a specific example. So you remember Calvin and Eve? So you know that Calvin was going to Eve's family picnic to meet her family for the first time. Neither of them know that Eve has undiagnosed autism. And Eve's cousin, if you remember, the douchebag, was making lots of digs and sarcastic comments at Calvin. Eve didn't even notice because of her inability to process these subtle cues. Calvin was annoyed that Eve didn't stand up for him. So let's continue the story. So Calvin was upset. In fact, he'd given Eve the cold elbow for the rest of the picnic. And again, because he didn't overtly say anything was wrong, Eve even missed these subtleties. So when they get home, Calvin is ignoring Eve, and in fact, he's locked himself in his bathroom and she can hear sobbing. So when he finally comes out and he disguises it as a number 2, Eve asks if he's okay, and he angrily replies, I'm fine, in a tone that clearly indicates that he's upset. However, due to the autism and Eve's literal interpretation of language, when he says he's fine, Eve actually believes him. So this leads to a full-blown argument, and all of it could have been avoided with better communication. And I really want to emphasize it's not Eve's fault. It literally all went under her sonar. Okay, we're almost there. You can do it. Get you back into it. The 5th and final way that subtle autism might hinder a relationship is sensory overload. So loud environments, crowds, physical touch, all of these things can be overwhelming for autistic people, which can make it difficult to enjoy romantic activities or experiences. So right now, I'm not going to talk about this in terms of the whole relationship, but let's talk about a specific date. Okay? So you were really looking forward to going on this romantic hot air balloon ride, and then your girlfriend managed to get tickets to the Oasis concert. She was in the queue for Ticketmaster for over 6 hours. There were 7,456 people ahead of her in the queue, but somehow she got there. She managed to buy the tickets. They were 500 quid each, 500 quid, but she's really excited about going. So you go to the concert, but you don't really enjoy the experience. You're not singing along to any of the songs. There's too many people around. It's just too loud. People are bumping into you. Your girlfriend thinks your face looks like the rear end of a dog, and she's really upset with your attitude. She thinks that you're being selfish and intentionally inflexible. She thinks like it's almost you've gone there with the intention of not enjoying Oasis. And this leads to an argument. And she says to you, how many special people change their plans? You know, you could have done the hot air balloon ride the next month. So she wondered what the fuss was about. My advice to you guys is you need to talk through your communication difficulties. Explain to her why this scenario is specifically distressing for you. And of course, don't look back in anger. So, my Psych for Sore guys and gals, does any of the above sound familiar? Could it be a hidden sign that you've got autism? Do these things kind of hamper your relationships? If so, go check out my first video about the other hidden signs, subtle hidden signs. And if you think the pattern fits you, then maybe you could do some research about it. Maybe you can have an assessment. And a question for you Psych for Sore guys, if any of these experiences feel familiar, tell me about them please in the Schmoment section below. Let's generate some healthy discussion. Okay kids, before we finish, let's recap what we've learned, because remember, there is a purpose for me making these videos. I want to educate you, I want to get you thinking like a psychiatrist. I also want to take over the world, not going great. So we learnt that somebody with subtle undiagnosed autism, when in a relationship, they might refuse to go out for dinner. They might not be able to change their plans because it doesn't fit into their careful schedule. And it might be misinterpreted as them being selfish. And this can lead to resentment or isolation, but it actually is because it causes them more distress that other people might not be able to compute. We learnt that your partner has a weird birthmark on his back that looks like James Blunt. We learned that autism can affect social skills, making it difficult to understand and interpret social cues, especially subtle social cues like sarcasm, humour, or implied meaning. Okay, that's it for me today. I've rambled on long enough. If you're interested in any other specific topics, let me know in the Schmoment section below. So I'm trying to do these sort of 5 myths, 5 signs, 5 tips kind of thing. So let me know specifically what you would like, what diagnoses, etc., and I will do my best to make a video about them. Until next time, go buy my goddamn book, and do not forget, whatever happens, do not forget. I love you.